7:33 morning to you, listening to a very chatty Stephen Dixon and Diamond this morning.
I don't know what we're on, but we can do with more of it.
Oh, yes.
Yes. Don't forget, we are live on your TV, on your radio, and of course, you can watch us anywhere in the world online. And a lot of people are, so great. It's great to have your company.
Subscribe if you're watching on YouTube, though. That's important.
We are the People's Channel, and that means that what you think and say is terribly, terribly important to us. Helps us build the programme.
Yeah, it does. I'll tell you what you might want to be interested in is having a natter through the papers this morning and seeing what Benedict Spence and Nabila Ramdani make of all the key stories. Morning, you two.
Good morning.
Because you picked some good ones this time on. Sunday Telegraph, Benedict, looking at the housing crisis. Now, Michael Gove, who's tasked with sorting a lot of this out, is saying that the housing crisis is costing them votes, or cost them votes in the local election. Well, what a great motivation to get something done then.
I mean, it's interesting. I don't actually think it did cost them votes in the local elections. I think actually, though, it is something that is costing them votes broadly as every election goes on. I don't think that many people voted on the housing issue, but there was a very good article on the Spectator's website yesterday by an economist called Sam Ashworth-Hayes, who is a natural conservative, who pointed out that he had voted for Labour because he is under 35, and actually the Conservatives don't offer anything for people like him. His words were that the UK, the Conservative Party rather, has no agenda other than to tax younger people in order to fund the lifestyles of pensioners. Now, a lot of people might disagree with that, but I do think that it echoes what Michael Gove is saying here, which is that the Conservative Party, after a decade or more in power, has an economy where people are earning less, they're being taxed more, they have less money in their pocket, the cost of living is going up, and all the while the younger generations are becoming less and less likely to vote Conservative because they don't have a stake in society, because they can't afford their own houses. Meanwhile, most of the housing stock is owned, this is not an attack on all pensioners, but it is owned predominantly by what some people call a gerontocracy, which is middle-class people approaching pension age who are living off a portfolio of multiple houses that they rent out to people. And that is a real concern for the Conservative Party, because Michael Gove is right. It does mean that, the natural base, the sort of the middle-class base that the Conservative Party would look to draw its votes from in the future, it's not going to exist in the next few years. It doesn't exist now because, this is something that people have been talking about actually for a very long time, and it's something that still doesn't quite seem to have got through to the Conservatives because they're still not building enough houses, which is why Michael Gove has been made the housing minister. Now, he says that this is what's cost them votes in the short term. I suspect it isn't. I suspect it's because of all the other things, but it will in the long term, and it is something that the Conservative Party, but not just the Conservative Party, because the Labour Party don't exactly have particularly good policies on this, and Lib Dem councils and Green councils, are the biggest obstacles when it comes to building new houses. The local councils are the ones that say, no, we don't want the houses built.
I do feel that it's part of the wider issues, though, that they've been effectively punished for overlooking, and, they have a lot to worry about, dare I say, this governing Tory party. I mean, sure enough, Partygate was part of the mix and part of the reasons why they've been a bit told off, as it were, or slapped on the hand at the voting. But, I mean, we only have to look at Tory flagship councils in London, for example, like Westminster or Wandsworth, where you have the lower council tax bills. Streams are impeccable, clean, and the services are running very smoothly.
But houses are still too expensive to buy, aren't they?
Yes, but in spite of all these perks, dare I say, which are real ones for central London, voters still decided to send quite a stark message to the government. So they have a lot to worry about, I think.
I wonder about the housing thing, because every year we've heard for decades we need to build 300,000 houses a year, whatever ridiculous figure it is. Well, when are we going to run out of land? This is, you have green and pleasant England. When are we going to run out?
Well, I don't think we're actually anywhere close to running out. I only think about sort of 10 to 15% of the country is currently covered. I mean, you also need to remember that it is possible to build upwards and not just outwards, and that is one of the real irritants, I think, for a lot of people, is that it is possible to build extensions upwards on a lot of existing houses, but the planning permission rules around doing it are absolutely impossible to negotiate. And again, that comes down to local councils saying, no, we don't want it here because it'll bring in more people, it'll put more pressure on our services, it'll affect the value of our houses that we already have, and that is the issue. There is a sort of a bottleneck where you've got lots of people from the bottom pushing up saying we need houses, and a few people who control, have seats on councils or whatever it is, and they say, no, we don't want it. And it is creating society-wide issues that Michael Gove is right, I think, to point out will cause the Conservatives real electoral issues in the future.
There are a lot of houses going up near me, ever such a lot, but they're all posh. They're all really expensive. They're not. What we average was 280. Yeah,
well,
they're well over that.
It's one of the things that you notice in London, which is a slightly separate microcosm, is that for every housing development that goes up, most of them are unaffordable to local people. They're not being built for local people. They're for international speculators to buy because the value will continue to go up because not enough are being built.
But I think, generally speaking, there is no correlation whatsoever between what people earn and the prices of property as they used to be in the past.
Yes.
You could easily get a property if a third of your earnings will literally go towards paying for the property, but now it's far more than that.
Yes.
And you have to rely on rich parents or inheritance or something of the sort to get.
And I think they overvalue some of
which
these
is hugely
houses.
unfair for most
They overvalue them and then say there's help to buy, but there's only help to buy in an overvalued house.
Yeah.
We've got housing
But
completely
we
wrong.
have got it altogether wrong. It is wrong that we think of it so much, I think, as a sort of a store of value in a very separate way to other things. I think that landlords should be incentivised to sell the properties that they already have, and housing associations and companies should be incentivised and possibly prodded a little bit as well to start building on the land banks that they already have possession of. And I think that is a really key thing.
It's also due to the fact, culturally speaking, I grew up in France and we're not a nation of buyers, contrary to Britain.
Well, can I ask you, what do you do when you retire?
What do you mean?
How do you afford to pay rent?
Oh,
If you're living, because I've never understood this, if you're living in a country where most people rent and they rent for the whole of their lives, what do you do when you don't earn
well, it
anymore?
puts you in a very vulnerable position because you basically at the hands of landlords moving you around, and that's not what you want to
So
see.
you have to have saved or be on some sort of insurance scheme or something?
Yeah.
We don't want to move into that position, do we?
Because obviously there's a lot of, one of the big things has always been that you inherit your parents' house or half of it or whatever it may be. Presumably it really affects inheritance in France.
Well, it does. Culturally, the French are not too bothered about owning the property. It's very much a nation of renters. They rent their places, and they're not too bothered about acquiring, their own home, which is a completely different mindset.
Are rents seen as much less? Are they less expensive than they are here? Because here they're almost more than a mortgage payment, aren't they? Your renting price. So you couldn't afford to save if you were paying rent.
Yeah.
Well, it's the exact same problem in France. People have difficulty paying their rent, and if you're looking at the market to buy a property, it's even more depressing. Not least of all because the quality is not there. You look at very expensive properties, which quite shabby state. So you're not even getting, value for your money, which is even more depressing.
This is the thing, though. We are setting ourselves up for a situation where, if we are all relying on inheritance, a generation will be waiting for the older generation to die. And that is an incredibly toxic atmosphere.
For the first time they'll ever be able to
That is
afford it.
and at a time when life expectancies are going up.
Yeah.
Because the quality of life is actually a lot better, and the health service is a lot better than it has been in the past.
And the value of
Very
the house,
dramatic.
any house that the older person owns, is going to be used up in their care,
Exactly.
in their old age
So there will be
care.
nothing to inherit.
So there's nothing there at all.
Soak some money out from that, it does.
Come on, Michael Gove, get your finger out and get moving on this and sort something out, please.
Let's have a look at tax. Should we, just to cheer us up? This is to do with betting firms.
Yes, indeed. It's the front page of The Observer, which is revealing effectively that betting giants such as Bet365's Paddy Power and Ladbrokes have quietly lobbied the Treasury against a proposed industry crackdown, and they claim that it will cost millions of pounds in lost tax receipts. So effectively the betting industry is warning of a very real risk that the taxes of about £3.2 billion a year it hands to the Treasury could be hit by tougher rules for the sector. I mean, to be fair, nobody likes paying excessive taxes, and the betting industry is effectively no different. But I think this kind of lobbying is very common actually in Westminster, and you would expect a massively rich industry, and indeed a massively influential industry like the gambling one, to be lobbying extremely hard all the time, especially as they face threats from the anti-gambling lobby. And there's no doubt that the sector, in my view, needs constant regulations, not least of all because it can and it does in fact destroy lives. The gambling, there is gambling problems, and in the end it's all about perhaps striking a balance about responsible gambling.
Yeah, I've got to say, I've never been a gambler. Never been a gambler, because the house always wins, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I'm too tight, basically.
Too safe, too clever.
I don't like clever.
Not a risk taker.
I'm not a risk taker. No, not with stuff like that. Look, we're out of time, but we will see you both a little bit later on.
Yes,
Abila
please.
and Benedict. Thank you.